Good morning, PUSD. Thanks for your patience in the waiting room. We're going to get going momentarily, and I just wanted to remind you that this meeting does have WebEx Assistant on, so if you want to use closed captioning, you can, there you go. You should be able to see it on the bottom left corner of your screen, and it'll pull up closed captioning in whatever language you want. And then meanwhile, if in the Q&A, you want to let us know what color speaks to you, we're throwing it back to the mood meter from last week where your options were red, yellow, green, or blue. Which color is speaking to you in this moment? Oh, we've got every color covered at this point. Some very enthusiastic colors. I like it. All right. Well, we'll get back to that momentarily. But the first part of the slide deck, I'm going to actually review a few things that we did cover last week because of the Q&A. And I thought it would be nice for us to re-anchor in this quote that really speaks to how you guys have been just working through so many hard things, and tomorrow another transition. So again, this pandemic is unprecedented for us, but we have experienced other hard things. This time gives us an opportunity to practice resilience and to show our kids what resilience looks like. So thank you. Thank you on behalf of so many teachers, parents, and community members in just how flexible you guys have been and how ready you all are to meet the in-person kids tomorrow. All right, so a lot of the Q&A last week was around some of the logistics. So I just wanted to be able to share with you guys again the teacher schedule. And then on the next slide, I'll go over a little bit of the student schedule. But just as a reminder, if you are at the middle school, your schedule's on the left. If you're at the high school, your schedule's on the right. But for your specific period by period breakdown, you're going to see your principal and school leaders because every school has a slightly different period by period breakdown. But the biggest thing here is that Tuesdays and Fridays, your schedule has been consolidated so that all synchronous learning time happens before lunch, and then that personalized learning time, which might not be with all of your students, is in the after lunch time. Mondays stay the same. Everybody is remote, and you have the option to teach remotely or from the classroom. But Tuesdays and Fridays, you'll be in the classroom with that consolidated schedule. However, the start and end times for the student day and for your day do not change. So then here is that snapshot again of the student day in the image to the right. So again, you'll see that their start time is still 8:15 if they're middle school, at 8:30 if they're in high school, and their end time for the day is still 1:55 if they're in middle school, and still 2:10 if they're in high school. But again, that difference is that the live learning with you happens before lunch with all of your students, online and in person. And then that after lunchtime is that personalized learning time that is still live, but might not be with your whole class. So with that, I called out some bullet points to the left. What can personalized learning time be used for? Now that it's not directly connected with that class period and you're just repeating time with that same class in the afternoon, you would want to use it for working with individual or small groups of students. So again, not every kid might be reporting to PLT in the afternoons every day. You may, if you need to, work with your whole group. But I just wouldn't recommend that it's an everyday thing, since the personalized learning time is really intended to work on any specific needs that small groups of students might have or individuals might have. You can also assign asynchronous work for those students who aren't meeting with you that day. That is absolutely something that you have been able to do up until now and continue. But we wanted to make a distinction that it's not to be confused with office hours. So I'm actually going to go backwards to the other slide. And if you'll notice at the very, very bottom of the Tuesdays through Fridays on either box, you'll see that 210 to 310 for high school or 155 to 255 for middle school is office hours and planning. That's separate from your PLT time. So office hours are optional for kids. That's really if they want to make an appointment with you to meet on just specific questions they have, but you may be asking them to have a personal appointment with you during PLT time. So the distinction is really that PLT time is teacher sort of driven in the sense that you indicate which kids are coming to meet with you during PLT time, whereas office hours is more student ask. So the student might ask to meet with you at that time. And I hope that helps. Okay. All right. So with that, I'll transition into today's agenda because as promised, we are going to be spending the majority of the time in breakout sessions. So you will have a little bit more time to collaborate and interact. Again, we know that it's not ideal. These amounts of time isn't everything that you would need to prepare, but we just wanted to get a start and be able to be in subject area groups. So with the breakouts that are going to happen momentarily, I did want to let you know in case this you need to change equipment, we're going to be doing open breakout rooms, which means that we'll be setting up 7 breakout areas by subject, and you will opt into your breakout group. You will not be automatically assigned. If you are on a Chromebook or a browser, you won't be able to select your breakout room. You will be able to select your breakout room if you are on a computer using the WebEx app, or even if you're on a mobile device like an iPad or a phone, but you're going through the app, you'll be able to see those breakout rooms. So if you happen to be on your Chromebook or using the browser, you will want to make sure that you switch devices so that you can choose your breakout manually when it gets to that point. All right, and we are hoping to get to that point around 11:15, so you've got a few minutes if you need to change out your device. Okay? All right, so with that, the rest of the agenda is really going to be informational. So in our first step, we're going to be talking about how we are connecting with students via SEL. So this is about the emotional connection. Then we'll switch into connecting the cohorts in a more physical connection. How do we actually manage the online with the in-person kids? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim Knudsen, who is our instructional coach over at John Muir High School, to take us through the rest of this.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I know we're all like having to take some deep breaths, like this is the week that the kids are coming back. So I just want you guys to know that I'm in it with you guys. I understand. And hopefully I could just give you guys a little information to make things a little bit easier. So we just want to connect with our students on an emotional level. And our next slide. This kind of the mood meter that you just picked the colors. We just wanted to bring that back to you and looking at the color that you pick, seeing your feelings. This is a great quick and easy check-in to see where your students are and how they're doing. And I love it at the bottom. It says name it to tame it, label it to regulate it. And those are 2 key components of the SEL curriculum. You know, you want to be able to know how you're feeling and how to deal with those emotions. So the 5 main areas for social and emotional learning, which I'm sure you guys are very much aware of, are number 1, self-awareness, 2, self-management, 3, responsible decision-making, 4, relationship skills, and then 5, social awareness. I added the picture on the side just to show you the circular motion, how they're all connected, and then at the top, how it goes from the classroom to the schools, to the families, to the communities. And then down below, it's just the SEL instruction in the classroom, in the climate, in the school, practices, authentic partnerships, and then just aligning learning opportunities with this. So the next slide, we're just going to go over some quick hacks, what we can do to incorporate it in our classroom. So the top link is the link to the article that inspired me. So I kind of took a little bit from there, but you guys can feel free to look at that later. And I changed a couple things. So some quick bite-sized bits of SEL in the classroom, just doing a mental health check-in chart, like would you rather, this or that, the mood meter on a scale from 1 to 9, what ducky are you? So those are just your little check-ins. You can quickly see what Bitmoji are you feeling. Number 2, greeting those students at your door, and the ones that are online, just naming them by name, like, hi, Andrew, I'm so glad you're here. Angelica, Annette, Anthony. So just really saying their names, letting them know that you see them, even though you really don't see them. You see their pictures. To create a calm down space, like having a space. A lot of us are not having a lot of students come back. So physically, you can have a space, but I linked John Muir High School's virtual wellness site there to give them a virtual space to calm down. Morning meetings. Sometimes morning meetings take like 30 minutes, so I know that we don't have all that time, but maybe once a week on a Monday, we just have a morning meeting about, hey, what happened this weekend? Or, there's a lot of stuff going on in the news. Maybe we just have a time that we meet about that, or just revisiting our norms and how we want everyone to feel included. The roomers and the Zoomers were all still one. So just different things you can do with the morning meetings. Good news radio, just like, what's the good news? Like, having the kids share good news, starting off your class with some music that is just either peaceful or happy or inviting. Focusing on growth mindset. I just put a link to a Padlet that just has different resources for growth mindset. Number 7 is like maybe having classroom libraries or even ones that they can listen to that deal with social emotional learning or meditation. Questions while taking attendance. So instead of having them say here, here, or here, you can either have like an Excel sheet where they answered the question of the day, so they're here, or just they say it out loud. So when you're saying whatever your question, what's your favorite ice cream? And so when I go down the list of attendants, Andrea would tell me hers, Andrew. So everyone's answering the question and not just saying here. An exit ticket. An exit ticket doesn't always have to be academics, maybe just a reflection on how today went, how they felt about how they did, are they feeling connected? So checking up on them there too. You can always do an exit ticket with a Google form. And then number 10, contributing to the classroom community, and this really so important that they contribute. And I linked it to a video for benefit mindset and how you have to go beyond ourselves and contribute to the community. So why not start small and contributing to our classroom? And then our next slide is SEL resources Padlet. So at the top of our next slide, the link is right there to all resources. So I do not want to overwhelm you. I just wanted to give you bits, but know that, hey, if you need a resource, click on this. And that's it.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to stay on this slide just for a moment because what Kim has, really succinctly tried to put together is a one-stop shop for you for any kind of resources that you can integrate. And the beauty is that she has pre-created a lot of these activities that you can just take. You can make a copy or you can go to her link and it's available. There's no expectation that you use it all. It's simply that what we want to make sure that you feel full permission in doing is taking care of your student relationships so that your content instruction can be much more facilitated as you go. You are experts in dealing with adolescents and teenagers, and you know very well that their emotions are a lot of the drivers of their decisions. We also know that the numbers of students choosing to come back in person aren't as high in the secondary grades as they are at the elementary. So you have an extra sort of, you know, connection concern in the sense that you've got a few kids there in person, but the most of your students are probably going to be continuing as if things haven't shifted. But your environment has shifted, some students' environment has shifted, and anytime one shift happens, you almost need to renorm and reset with your class. And so these are some you know, pre-built things for your consideration as well as for your use. So we don't want you to feel overwhelmed by any of it. If you have things that are already in place that you use to do daily check-ins with your students, to bring them into the community, please feel free to share with one another and to use those. But if there's anything that you're looking for that's new or fresh because of this transition, just know that this is available for you. I know I don't even have to ask her. Kim would be more than happy if you reached out to her if you wanted any kind of guidance on that, or to work with your instructional coaches as well. She is, you know, a frequent collaborator, and just know you have a very connected support community for any of that kind of information. But again, we're leading with this because really the number one priority is to bring those students into the community during this other time of transition. Do that first, and then we'll worry about the content. All right. So with that, I'm going to shift to, I wasn't trying to shift to, to one of your resources, but now you can see one of our resources. Let me go back into the slide deck. Could you guys confirm for me if you can still see, you can probably see my tabs now though, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're just going to have to go this way. This is the way the desktop works. So I'm going to shift to the next slide. There we go. All right. And we're going to talk about physical connection. So there's obviously that emotional community connection, but then let's talk about some of the logistical connections with having in-person kids as well as having online kids. So we have this great little graphic here that actually Pepperdine produced for us when they were working with us early on this hybrid simultaneous model. In the classroom, we're really, and this is specific for secondary, we had a slightly different version for elementary, but because you only have students for about a period at a time, which is approximately leading to about an hour with the new schedule, there are some things that we were able to do with elementary that we don't think would be as tenable in secondary. So we see it really as three possible configurations. And the reason why we've sort of curated it to this is because you really only have about 6 weeks with them. And transitions take time. So even though most of your students are flexible and able to transition well, we did want you to have full permission to keep it simple if needed. Maybe there's a little bit of sophistication that you're already working on with your students and getting them prepared. That's great. But we're just kind of working with the idea that how can you reach all students, both cohorts, even in the most simplest manner. So that's up at the top, the whole class discussion. How do you bring students in the whole class? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the other two are your small group collaboration options. If you're at the point where your students have connected both in person and online, are working well together, you may want to choose to do some small group collaboration, which we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time on today, but wanted to give you the configuration so that if you want to, you can work with your instructional coach or one of the members of EdTech or CIPD. And the first is in option one, the flip-flop. And that's essentially just focusing on kids who are online at one time and then kids who are in person at one time and flipping and flopping them within, you know, maybe like a 15-minute span of time. So one group's working independently, the other is with you, and then you flip flop to work with the other group while the other group is independent, but all within the same class period. In option two, that's mixed cohorts. That's when all of the kids are logged into the meeting and they can be collaborating amongst themselves, but this one would require headphones or headsets so that the different cohorts that are working together can still hear and not interrupt each other. This one might be you rotating between groups or just allowing all of them to work independently while you monitor them. All right. But again, the whole class discussion up at the top is the simplest model and the one that we'll talk about a little bit today. Okay, so this is a graphic that is actually produced from the Linden School, who has been doing hybrid simultaneous learning since, I believe, October. So it was a really interesting way that they described how the lesson goes. If you look at this graphic, it is a little bit overwhelming, so I'm going to break it down for you. If you look just at the very top in the black and gray column that says teacher, if you read this graphic left to right, it tells you what's happening throughout the entire period. So if you're the teacher and you're thinking about what you typically do, what your actions are, you do your lesson, you assign some practice, you go over that practice with the class, then you give them maybe some independent practice, and then you synthesize or consolidate whatever they learned. You summarize what that lesson was. So that's typically the direction of any lesson that you would do in a typical period. Then if you go down to the next row, that talks about what the in-person student is doing at the time that each of those lesson sections is happening. Then go down to the next row in green. That's what the at-home student is doing during any given part of your lesson. And then if you go to the blue row next, that's what technology you would be implementing or using at any given point in that lesson. And then finally, the very last row is the check for understanding in any given point of that lesson. So if you were reading it left to right, it's just sequential over the time of that period. Now I'm going to bring in the rectangle so we can just talk about that distinction of what each component is or what each person is doing during each component of the lesson. So let's focus in on the main portion, that mini lesson. So at the time that you are giving the mini lesson, in red, the students who are in person are observing and taking notes in person. In green, you'll see that the kids at home are doing likewise. They're taking notes or whatever interaction you need them to have in your lesson. It might not be notes, but they're observing via WebEx. In blue, the only equipment that you need for that to happen is your camera, your mic, and your video conferencing, WebEx or Google Meet. And then finally, at the end, while you're doing your mini lesson, you're just conducting Q&A with both sets of kids. The consideration there is how do you make sure that you are monitoring who is online and as well making sure that the students in person are also responding and able to hear their classmates. So it goes on like that throughout where you can see what each group of kids is doing at any given time. And you'll notice that the expectation is that in-person students and at-home students are doing the same actions. They're just using different methods of communicating with you. So the at-home students are obviously using the technology because that's how they're reaching you. Whereas the in-person students are directly in front of you and you do not need to have them on the technology in a given time unless they're asked to connect with their cohort, or I'm sorry, with their at-home cohort. So I'm going to summarize it with this slide. Essentially, for your students attending online, you want to consider the equipment setup. That means the biggest recommendation that you've probably already discovered is using multiple devices or using that Logitech for the increased audio and visual. But having the multiple devices is typically how you'll see your at-home students while also being able to teach. And then how is the participation encouraged of all students? Are the in-person kids responding more frequently than your online kids? You'll discover that in a few days. And how do you encourage it of all? In particular with secondary, if the majority of your kids are online and you only have a handful that are in person, how do you sort of incentivize the in-person kids for having taken the time to come to campus so that the participation, motivates others to become more participatory? And then we talked about this last week, which was how can content be shared? So it's accessed by all kids, meaning whatever you're assigning in class, your online kids still have access to. I know most of you will be using things on Canvas, but that transitions me to this bottom bullet. For the students attending in person, one of the big things is that we know that a lot of the students who are choosing to come in person, they didn't come in person to still stay on the computer all day long. And so consider how you might be the teacher that you know you are deep inside and not just another person monitoring them while they're online connecting to their class. What are things that you can do that are tactile or interactive with students who are in person that sort of honors the fact that they chose to come in person to meet with you? So it could be as simple as if you're having the students typing in on Google Docs, they can choose to do it on pen and paper. I mean, if you're going to end up having them do it back into Google Docs later, I wouldn't recommend that. But if there are any kind of activities where they have a tactile purpose versus just a digital one, it helps them get off of the meeting for that period of time when they're with you. So just some considerations to take into account when you are thinking about what in-person students should be seeing when they're in class. Do you want them to be seeing their other classmates, in which case you're projecting the class onto the screen, or do you want them to be seeing whatever you're teaching from, in which case you're having them focus on either what you're doing at the whiteboard or a projection of your slide deck or whatever it is. So those are just some of the physical considerations that we have. With that, we're going to take all of these thinking points around the main and simplest way of connecting the cohorts, and we're going to actually transition you guys into breakout rooms so that you can actually talk with other people in your subject area and work with them on sort of best practices or other ideas. Momentarily, we're going to open up those breakout rooms and let you choose how to get into them. But I did want you to know that we're not going to come back into this main room. So I'm going to give you a couple announcements so that you can definitely follow up with things when you're into the breakout rooms. So the first is that the slide deck that I am using right now is going to be hyperlinked into the PD resources page. That's the image that you see on number 3 in the bottom right-hand corner. The slide deck has all of the links to those pre-made activities that Kim was talking about earlier, as well as the backup information of anything that we just discussed. Then if you come back with me to number 1, starting tomorrow, when you guys are back with some students on campus, we do run a hotline during the day. It's until I think about 1 p.m. So 7:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. that you can call and get immediate support from the EdTech or CIPD team. And then after school, we have office hours for you following student dismissal. So it's at any time, I believe from 1 to 3 p.m. if you just want to jump into a video conference with somebody. You know, it's typically been technical questions, but we'll be there as well. Okay, so hotline by phone, office hours by video conference. And then next Monday, we will actually do an optional hybrid simultaneous learning part 3. And that one is for anyone who wants to dive deeper into some more instructional ideas for hybrid simultaneous learning. And we'll be specifically with Ella Freenis, instructional coach at Washington STEAM Magnet. Multilingual Academy, doing the Frayer model in hybrid simultaneous learning. So there are a lot of different supports that are out there. Again, take your time, do whatever it is that you need to stabilize the transition in the next few days and weeks with your class. But just wanted you to know that there are different ways that we can make sure that you feel supported or that you get what you need following this session. Okay. All right. I'm going to actually double check with Harmony, who's hosting the meeting, if the breakout rooms are, I believe she's already set them up.
We are good to go.
You are good to go. Thank you. Okay, so in order to see the breakout rooms, what you're going to do now is navigate to, you know, actually, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I don't think you guys need me to share. We're going to head up to breakouts. Actually, let me just give you a quick look. That we're going to do a humanities breakout. There's actually only one breakout in humanities. Everyone's going into one session. Humanities includes ELA, ELD, history, social sciences, and world language. So anyone dealing with literacy, you go to humanities. Then you have your math, your science, your PE, and your CTE breakouts. Arts will be separated by music and choir with Karen Klages. Theater and visual arts will go with Karen Anderson. Okay? So well, that was quick and automatic. I'm sorry if anyone got cut off. We just had a preset time. So thank you all so much for being here today, taking the time to participate in the breakouts. And we don't want to take you guys too much over. Remember, we have an optional follow-up for hybrid simultaneous next week. If you'd like to continue to talk about instruction, it'll go out in the Monday module s'more. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day and good luck and Godspeed this week when you see some in-person kids. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye, secondary.